We want to bring in Martha MacCallum now, of course, host of the Story, and she is live there at the American Cemetery in Normandy, France. Martha, I think most of our viewers probably haven't made it to this region of the world, a very solemn and important place, but just tell us what it's like there. It's probably an incredible scene today.
Yeah, good morning. It's great to be with both of you. You can see behind me that the ceremony is just starting to get underway. The president landed on Marine One just a few short minutes ago, sitting down with Laura Ingraham for an interview, which you will see tonight. But it is just a striking moment here. And I'm thinking about the 40th anniversary of D-Day when Ronald Reagan spoke at Pointe du Hoc. And that moment was so significant because for many World War II veterans, a lot of them had just retired from a lifetime of working in the as civilians in America, and it was the first opportunity that they really had to come back. So they might have been in their 60s, mid-60s at that point. Now you've got the other end of that spectrum, these men who are in their 90s who are making this trip back, and many of them perhaps for the last time, although I have to say, having met a lot of these individuals over the last several months, they may be going for quite some time. They are just an incredibly resilient bunch of individuals, and they have a very strong spirit and incredible stamina. So don't count them out. But many of them are in the front rows here. And I think about Ronald Reagan looking at the front rows back on the 40th anniversary and saying, these are the boys of Pointe du Hoc. These are the boys who scaled the cliffs. These are the boys who took back Europe, essentially, to paraphrase some of that just extraordinary speech from Ronald Reagan back then. This is a big moment for President Trump on the world stage to speak directly to these veterans about their service and to speak more broadly about the ideals of what it means to be an American citizen, what it means to serve, what is our place in the world on the broad scale. You think about the challenges that we face now, whether it be with Iran or China, which is obviously a very forceful power economically and militarily on the world stage. They are set on a track of dominance that they want to achieve in the world. So we face a lot of threats. They're a very different scope, perhaps in many ways, than the threat that was faced in World War II. But in many senses, they are grave as well. So the president will address the country, address the world about what it means to stand for American values, because that was such an understood element of World War II. It was crystal clear back then that there was evil in the form of Hitler and Hirohito, the emperor of Japan, and Tojo, who was the general leading the forces of Japan. The axis was very clear in terms of the threat that it presented to the world. And just looking at this crowd, just right there on the left is Andre Chapas, who I went to Iwo Jima with several months ago and climbed Mount Suribachi. This is an extraordinary group of individuals, and we do have to take a moment to just revere them, listen to their stories, and realize that we're just really blessed to have them with us still.
Martha, what do you think is the most important thing that we should learn from these men?
You know, what always strikes me, Jillian, is their humility. You know, we live in a time when there's so much about self. You know, I think of selfies and, Facebook and social media and all of this stuff that's so centered on self. This is a generation that was selfless. And I think that is a virtue that we have lost somewhat in America, of putting something bigger than yourself before your own interests, being willing to sacrifice. I mean, think about that. We really don't do a whole lot of sacrificing. I think about even the trade issues that are going on right now and the concerns about even having to make the small sacrifices that might be required of things that might be a bit more expensive or a bit less available with regard to that. And then you think about what was happening on the home front during World War II, where people went, without butter. They didn't buy a new car for all of those years during the war because all those factories, all the Ford and GM, they were all converted to making military planes, to making engines. So nobody was getting anything new during that time. And there wasn't a heck of a lot of complaining going on because there was a bigger purpose that Americans were all united in. So, I just think it's very important to think about those values and to think about a little bit about what we have lost. The president talks about making America great again, and some people give him a hard time about that. But I think this is the kind of thing that he's talking about when he says that. And I think this is a great opportunity to think about a time when America was great, and America, of course, is still great. But this greatest generation had some pretty specific qualities that are certainly worth remembering and emulating whenever possible.
Yeah, that's a great point, Martha. When you look at the sacrifice and what this day means, if you look at a map of what Hitler and the Nazis had taken in Europe, it is quite impressive to see how much power they had over this continent until what would happen after this day. The invasion of D-Day in northern France leads to taking back just that small portion of northern France, and then the Allies move into Paris. Paris gets liberated. They move to the east and the north. You get the Battle of the Bulge. The Germans lose there. They move into Germany. The Soviets meet them in Germany. They take back Germany, and then the atomic bombs are dropped. Japan surrenders. The war is over. But it all started right where you are today, and without American involvement and engagement in this war, you could argue that this war would have been won by the Nazis.
You are absolutely right. And there we see the president sitting down on the left-hand side of your screen with Laura Ingraham. And then we see some of these individuals. And one of the things that I'm struck by as I'm looking at these gentlemen, there are individuals in this group who fought at Normandy. Then they fought in the Battle of the Bulge, which you just mentioned. And a couple of them were then sent to the Pacific and fought in Okinawa. I mean, wow. Think about that triumvirate. That is an absolutely remarkable task to put on any one individual. Jack Gutman was in Okinawa as well as here at Normandy. He was a medic. So, I mean, just extraordinary stories of just so much sacrifice that is just truly extraordinary. And also, you know, you think here in Normandy about the relationship between the United States and France. I spoke with the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to France the other day, and Jamie McCourt, and she was talking about, France is our oldest ally, right? So you go back to Thomas Jefferson going to Paris before the Revolution and securing their support in that endeavor. It truly is our oldest ally. And so now today you're going to see Emmanuel Macron, the current president, under some pressure from the populist arm of the political scene in France right now. He is trying to, improve the economy in France. He's got a lot of challenges ahead of him. Immigration, obviously, is a big challenge in France as well. But this is our oldest relationship, our oldest foreign alliance, and it is one that is very important to both of our countries. So that's going to be something that I'm sure the president will touch on and Macron will touch on as well. They started off with that very chummy relationship. You remember how sort of physically chummy even they were at the first visit that Macron made to the White House. Things have chilled a little bit in the months in between. President Macron even speaking about forming an EU military force, which did not sit well with President Trump. President Trump obviously has tried to build up NATO. But there's been some tensions here. I don't think you're going to hear too much of those spoken about today. It's not the place for that, but they will meet after this. And, it's an important relationship and has been since prior to the American Revolution.
Earlier, Martha, you were talking about, some of the past presidents and the speeches that they gave on D-Day. And can you talk about the significance of what President Trump is about to say? Because as you know, and to no one's surprise, there has been a lot of criticism of how he's handled this overseas trip. A lot of certainly critical headlines back here at home, more so at home, I'm sure. But just talk about the significance of his words today.
It's a big opportunity for President Trump today. We understand that President Macron is going to speak for about 15 minutes, something along those lines. And then President Trump will step to the stage and he will speak for roughly 25 minutes. I think the reason for the prominence of the speech from the American president is that this is the American cemetery in Normandy. And there are 9,388 graves behind me, crosses, Stars of David, that mark the sacrifice that was made by all of these men. So, there are very few speeches that go down in the history books, and you don't always know when they're coming, and we'll see how this speech is today, but there's no doubt in my mind that they've spent, a lot of time and effort putting these words to paper. I thought it was interesting that when the president was in Portsmouth, England, which was one of the takeoff points from England prior to the invasion, they call it the liberation force that came to France, he quoted FDR and his prayer to the troops and to the American people to come together and pray. So no doubt he will make reference to some of those presidents who've gone before him. FDR likely may be part of that speech. Maybe Ronald Reagan's words may come into play here as well. But the president has a unique opportunity here, I think, to talk about what he thinks is great about America. And I think there are a lot of people in France. There's Jack Gutman right in the middle there, who viewers of my show have gotten to know over the past month. He's just an extraordinary man, 18 years old, and saved a lot of lives on the beaches. And as he says, He was also the person who held the hands of those who gave their last breath on those beaches as well. And, I'm jumping off script here for a moment, but, yesterday he walked around behind me and paid tribute to some of those men, and tears came to his eyes. It's the first time he's been back here since he was 18, and he never made it off the beach last time. So he said, the only time I was ever in France was when I was on that beach, and now I'm getting to know the people of France a little bit. And he's just been so struck with how warm they are. And they do not forget that it was the Americans who liberated them from the grip of the Nazis. So that, I think, was just a really heartwarming moment for Jack Gutman and others as they revisit these communities that welcomed them with open arms and just, saw freedom when they saw the faces of these 18, 19, 20-year-old men who had come over from America to help liberate this country, this great country of France. Really remarkable day.
That's great. I mean, the stories with these veterans that you have, Martha, is just fantastic. We really appreciate your time this morning.